There we
I
go.
don't.
And there it
I
is,
don't.
01. Ask the Podcast Coach for August 3rd, 2024.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that music. That means it's Saturday morning. It's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I'm Dave Jackson from theschoolofpodcasting.com, and joining me right over there is the one and only Jim Cullison from theaverageguy.tv. Jim, how's it going, buddy?
Greetings, Dave. Happy Saturday morning to you. Happy 100% generator-driven podcast for me this morning. No power. We have a tree down. We had a big storm on Wednesday. Tree down, ripped the pole. I've never seen this happen. The pole came down. So we have wires. And we have no power, so it's not as dangerous at this point, but wires and everything. Anyways, generators online. I think we're going to be okay. I gassed it up before we started. I'm ready to go. Thanks for having me this morning.
Yeah, that's always, it makes you appreciate, electricity. And you're probably learning more about, wow, that appliance is,
yeah,
chewing
like the
up some juice.
Nespresso. You don't really know how much juice the Nespresso pulls until you monitor it. So
that's always fun. So we're gonna do the invisible coffee pour this morning, and that coffee pour, of course, is brought to you by our good friend Mark over at podcastbranding.co. The beautiful thing about Mark is he is a podcaster and he's an award-winning graphic artist. I've used him on many of my shows. I think at this point, almost all of my shows. Podcast Hot Seat, Your Podcast Website, School of Podcasting, Ask the Podcast Coach, etc., etc. And the beauty of it is he's got the marketing brain, right? He's got the guy that he's going to sit down with you one-on-one. You can tell him about your show, and then you don't have to come up with the marketing. You can, if you have one, by all means, share it. It'll give him the idea of kind of where you want to go. But at that point, he's going to listen to your show. He's going to check out where you want to go with your show. Is it funny? Is it serious, etc.? And he's going to make sure that it matches your brand with your podcast for maximum input. And it's not just artwork. It could be a website. It could be a lead magnet. Anything that you need to look good, well, there's really only one place to go, and that, of course, is podcastbranding.co. Tell him Dave and Jim sent you.
And of course, big thanks to our good friend Dan Lefebvre over there, based on a true story podcast.com. This week, he covers true story this week, his 3-episoder. He gets 3 movies in Indianapolis, Rush, and Patent. Available now for Rush isn't really a war movie, but Patton and Indianapolis are. Check it out today. Available over there, based on a true story podcast.com. Dan, thanks for your sponsorship.
And the beautiful thing this week.
And now.
That's not it. No. Where did my David Lee Roth? See, I thought I was all like ready to go, know what I was doing. But isn't that half the fun of watching the show? Like,
Woo!
Yeah, thank you very much. We have an upgraded awesome supporter, Randy Black, over at M2H2, which is Mountain Music Half Hour. So if you want to find it, the website, m2h2music.com. I was listening this morning, and if you're a person that's like, I just love all music, because he had like a cool kind of young singer-songwriter going on. I had some hardcore metal, little rap in there, had a blues guy towards the end who was a little pitchy. I'm like, oh, okay, I remember this from the days of the PodSafe Music Network. But he had a great guitar tone. And so if you just want to click play on something and hear some good music come your way, check it out over at m2h2music.com. And what's cool is this is one of them their newfangled podcasts where as you listen, you want to listen on a new podcast app. You can find that at newpodcastapps.com. You fill your wallet a little bit, and I'll talk about that. That got a whole lot easier. And you can basically, as you are listening, you are streaming music. You're streaming, Satoshis to the actual artist that you are listening to. And when Randy talks, you're streaming, Satoshis to Randy. It's that whole value for value thing. and you can check. Now, do you have to have one of them there, newfangled ones to listen? Because Dave, I'm listening on Apple. No, you don't have to. But if you want to participate in the value for value thing, it's super easy to get set up and pretty cool. So thank you, Randy, for being an awesome supporter. And yeah, the over at True Fans, this is Sam Sethi. He now has it to where you can set up a wallet and then basically via Stripe. So where before it was kind of like, oh, can I use a debit card? Can I use a credit card kind of thing? Now you just go over and I can put in my credit card number. And you can only buy $10 worth of Satoshis, which is fine. That's like 14,000 Satoshis. And you can actually now set it up, which is what I do. I go over once a month and put money in my wallet. And so you can now set it up to just every month dump some Satoshis into your wallet, and then you can use that in whatever app you want. And so that is getting easier. It's kind of fun because there was a little bit of a hiccup there for a minute where there was one company that the more popular you get and you have a lot of money going through your system, the more the U.S. government goes, hey, are you like laundering money through this by any chance? So Alby was like, we don't really want the attention of the U.S. government. So they kind of said, no more U.S. wallets. And the goal is to have people like Sam and like Fountain and these other places where you can have a custodial wallet. And because if you think about it, most of the time you don't listen to, oh, I listen to Jim in Overcast, and I listen to Dave in Podcast Guru, and I listen to Daniel in what, like, no, you have your one app where all your podcasts are. So you have your wallet there. It'll be interesting to see how this goes forward. It's one of those things that it's fun. It is kind of nerdy, and a lot of people freak out when you say Satoshi because they're like, "Oh, God bless you," because they think you sneezed or something. But that's what's going on with that whole fun-filled thing. And good morning to the chat room. I'm sitting here. It's funny because we were using EV MOOCs the last couple of weeks, and I was like, "Oh, I don't know what I'm doing." And now that I'm back in Ecamm, I'm like, a little rusty on this. So we do have Jason Bryant is probably over there in France, I would think. He's Mr. Olympic guy. And he says, had a mini podcast meetup with Keep the Flame Alive yesterday. How cool is that? There you go. And, luckily there's, lots of fun sports stories going on with the Olympics. No, they're all about it's all talk about, what they should call it. They should have like a gold medal for, and I don't want to steer the podcast into this discussion, but the whole recreational outrage that's going on around the Olympics is quite entertaining, if I do say.
Always is. You generate that kind of, that kind of event is always going to draw some of it, just for sure.
DR says, should I dare chance the audio again? I'll tell you what, if you come on and things are squirrely, we'll just say, hey, things are squirrely. And we'll see what happens. But yeah, anybody can come in, askthepodcastcoach.com/question, and we will ask that.
Or throw it in chat. We get those too. Sometimes that's easier. This group likes to use the chat a lot. So
yeah, and Ralph says, I listened to Dave's podcast consultant show this morning while I was walking, and I ended up at McDonald's drive-thru. You wrecked my healthy eating for the day. The latest episode of the podcast consultant show, if you find it, it's Your Podcast Consultant, but the website is podcastconsultant.com. And I was talking about how your show should be like McDonald's, because I travel around quite a bit. And the one thing I do like is when, especially in the morning, if I see the Golden Arches, I'm like, oh, Egg McMuffin, and when I go in, it doesn't matter if I'm in Poughkeepsie or Chicago or San Diego or whatever, an Egg McMuffin is an Egg McMuffin. And so your show should be that, to where you're delivering that. But the other thing, I actually tried, I had an Egg McMuffin and a Coke this morning because it's the weekend, and I tell myself because it's Saturday, somehow it's not unhealthy to eat McDonald's on the weekend, which is a lie. But I got this thing to make an Egg McMuffin at my house, right? And it's yummy and it's great. It's awesome. And it dawned on me that I was still really striving for McDonald's. I was missing McDonald's. I'm like, why? I have the Egg McMuffin. And it turns out why I go to McDonald's is not the Egg McMuffin, it's the Coke. And they do some stuff to their Coke where it's extra cold. And I heard somebody say they like pump oxygen into it. I don't know. That sounds a little tinfoil hatty. But it is one of those things that, man, if I go to Wendy's or Burger King and get some Coke, that sounds so weird. I'm gonna go get some Coke from Wendy's. All right, it's not the same. And then when you get it from McDonald's, and so what is that? That is something you can't get anyplace else. So there's that. Your podcast should have something like that and be consistent in quality. And there you go. You're off to the races. So, but
there's some conspiracy theories that it's a different recipe than the
actual
Coke
Coke?
at McDonald's is an actual different recipe than they make for their cans. Listen, it's a great urban legend to have, and I don't know if you can, some podcasts create backstories or they create inside jokes or things like where there are legends. There's inside, there's this idea of something to talk about behind the scenes, something secretive or something, and that does generate. I mean, think about that. All those urban legends, people talk about them whether they're true or not, and it's great advertising. There's this commercial going on for, I think it's for Nike, and it's I think LeBron says winning's not for everyone, and talk about generating a lot of controversy, right? But you think, oh, it's a little risky, right? Well, I mean, that commercial is getting played all over the place now, and so do you be a little controversial in your podcast? Well, you maybe in some cases you could. Do you generate? I see this on YouTube all the time where folks generate, they'll like say something controversial or whatever. Leave, I want to hear from you. Go into the comments. Well, we know the comments drive the algorithm in YouTube, so it's a way of generating some traffic, right? So there, I think there could be some, opportunities to, like the Coke, to have something. Yeah. Have something people talk about a little bit, right?
Yeah. There's a guy on YouTube, the Philip DeFranco Show. You've just been filled in, right? And every time, and he talks about, and it's weird because a lot of it is news, but it's news about big YouTubers complaining about other big YouTubers. And I just said, maybe I'm not your demographic, but I don't care that, Hot Jar is complaining about, Squiggly Pants or something. I'm like, who are these people? But
people
every
love
time,
that stuff.
yeah.
They love
And he's
that
always
stuff.
like, so this guy's saying this and this guy's saying that. We're not sure. Like, I tell you what, I have a question for you. Let me know in the comments. Like, and
Yeah.
I'm like,
All right.
if you were doing a Philip DeFranco drinking game and you drank every time he said, let me know in the comments, you would be hammered by the end of the show. And I'm like, ugh. But Todd the Gator has a great point. The spongy hash brown is the cherry on top. Yeah, that is literally where they went, hey, Merle, what do you want me to do with a sponge? Oh, deep fry it, put it in the fryer, and then throw it in a little bag. I'm like, no, not going to do it.
You had a little South and Texas in that accent. That was pretty good.
Yeah.
It's somehow soggy and crunchy at the same time. I don't understand the physics of those.
Yeah.
And they're just so delicious. Sometimes when my lips are dry, you're like, oh, I need a lip balm. You're like, nope, I'll just go get a hash brown from McDonald's and that'll just rub it on your lips.
And Jeff brings up a good point. They have bigger straws, right? So you get a bigger rush. You don't have to like turn your face inside out. Have you ever tried to suck a McDonald's, and this is making me hungry. You ever tried to suck a McDonald's milkshake through a straw? You will turn your face inside out. This is back when they were actually milkshakes. Now they're like half of this whipped cream stuff. I'm like, what happened to did they get rid of that? Dan Lefebvre, who knows a thing about history, right? He says the history of McDonald's, they got popular because of that consistency, which simply didn't exist back then. Back in the day. Yeah. That's Chris says hot jar and squiggly pants. Every Thursday. Hot jar and squiggly pants on Hot 97. Yeah, exactly. Here we go. We have a controversial question from Ralph. The chat room is on fire this morning. Thanks, guys. Will Dave Jackson's addition to Podpage launch them into huge success? They're already a huge success.
Thank God we can talk about that now. Jeez,
Yeah.
Dave, you put that out there for 2 weeks. You teased us with it. If you didn't like it, leave some comments down below that you didn't like. Just leave those comments down
Yeah.
below. Tell us if you liked Dave stretching it out or no. Congratulations, Dave, on your move over to Podpage. Sounds like it's going to be a good place for you, and excited for you. Congratulations.
Yeah. So let me see. We got a lot of good questions here. First, Jody Krangle. I've finished. I'm like 99.9% done with this book. Thanks for the suggestion on Tom's Webster's book. It's called The Audience is Listening. I need to throw this in the chat room, or if you go to supportthisShow.com/Tom Webster book, that will take it. And what it really should have been called is Your Baby's Ugly. But there are some really, what's cool about it is I think it's chapter 3, talks about doing a survey, which everyone should do. And by that, I'm going to say that again. Everyone should survey your audience so that you quit guessing what they want. But he talks about questions to use, and then you can actually get a download of some of these questions to kind of build your own. And what's cool is then all of a sudden you go through and there are all these great little chapters. And what's fun is he calls his chapters episodes. So when you get to like episode 8, and he's talking about this, he's like, oh, remember that question you asked back in chapter 3? This is where it comes into play. And all of a sudden you go, oh, it's like this big enlightening. It's a really good book, especially about knowing your audience, because I always say, who is your audience? Why are you doing it? And this really gets you to know who your audience is. And then he talks about editing, like everything about it. I was like, yes. And it was just like, okay, bookmark that. So I did an episode, you're talking about saying your opinion, and I did an episode on the School of Podcasting not so long about you should probably share your opinion, even though it's not going to be the same as everyone in your audience. And I love this book because it's kind of me going, yes, I agree with that. And yes, I agree with that. So why do I think it's a good book? Because Tom thinks like I do. Really, it's kind of what it boils down to. But it's a really, and it's not a super long read. It's not a short read, and I got it on Audible, so I got to read I got to listen to Tom read the book. So yeah, it's let me see if you guys get it. It's go to Amazon or whatever, but I'll have my affiliate link in the show notes. And then Jody has another question, and Chris has a question coming up. What have you found to be the best way to do market research for your podcast if you're not sure what your sample size will be? Example, if you don't have a ginormous listenership. Well, again, a survey helps. And that's, as I was reading Tom's book, I was like, I haven't done an audience survey. And this one would be much better about it. There's that. When I didn't do it yesterday because we had about 12 people. Every Friday I do lunch with Dave. So this group coaching, and we had a brand new School of Podcasting. Like he joined like 5 minutes before lunch with Dave. And so he said, yeah, I've been listening to you for 6 months. And 9 times out of 10, if you do that to me in a conference, I'm going to go, what do you like about the show? And they'll say, oh, you're funny. And, I always learn something, blah, blah, blah. And then I'll go, what do you wish I would stop doing? And then I shut up. And then they're like, no, nothing. It's great. And I'm like, anything really? No, and sometimes they'll actually come up with something. Sometimes they'll kind of cop out and go, if I think of something, I'll let you know, honest. But there are times back in the days of Bernie, there were people that didn't really like Bernie on the show. Jim, you are the king of surveys, right? You work for Gallup.
Well, not me personally,
right?
But I do work for Gallup. Yeah, we do a lot of surveys. I would say, like, if you think the audience is small or you're in a really tight niche, you use Reddit or Facebook to find groups that match that criteria. It's the easiest way, I think, and then see if you can get in there and just ask some questions. Like, don't try to sell them right away. Don't try to, you've done this before, Dave. Don't go in there and then blast them with your podcast links.
Right.
But ask them real questions. Get some idea. YouTube may be an opportunity to go. There's a community for everything on YouTube. Go watch folks who are maybe talking about this. Again, it might be, if it's a real tight niche, there may be nothing on YouTube, which is an opportunity, by the way. But if you could go out on YouTube and watch, I was just rewiring the furnace to accept, generator power. Generally, furnaces are hardwired into your house. And I needed to figure out, okay, how can I put a plug on this thing so I can plug it into the generator, at least run the fan on the thing? Well, I went to YouTube, looked it up, found a couple folks that were doing it. And in some cases, this is big in the whiskey space. All the YouTubers know each other. And so you might get to know, okay, here's the movers and the shakers in the community. Here's some things that are being said. Here's what's being covered and not being covered. You may even reach out to them and ask those questions of them. So I think those are 3 good ways: Reddit, Facebook, LinkedIn, maybe if it's a business topic, and maybe do some YouTube research to find the folks that are talking about it. Many times, if you reach out to them, they'll answer back. You have to send emails. You have to talk to them at some point, right? So I think, Dave, those are some good ways to do it.
Well, that's a great thing I've done is I will go to YouTube, type in my topic. So maybe I'm doing a show about sneakers, which would be interesting. But anyway, I'm doing a show about sneakers. So I type in sneakers into YouTube. I see what the top channel is. And then I go to that top channel, go to their videos, and sort by most popular. And in theory, you should have a list of topics of what sneaker people want. Then go into that top rated video and look at the comments, because people on YouTube are not shy. They will let you know if they don't like the show. And then in Amazon, same thing, type in a topic, go to the book and look for 4-star and 2-star reviews. Now, why 2 and 4, not 1 and 5? 1 will be like, this book sucked. And then 5 will be like, this is the best book ever. So when you get into 4, you'll get somebody who goes, well, I would have given him a 5, but she didn't talk about blah, blah, blah. And a 2-star would be like, well, this was almost the worst book I've ever read, but at least they did such and such. So they're a little more descriptive at 2 and 4 than they are at 1 and 5. So because that's really, Jody was saying, or not Jody, Steph was saying, what if I don't have a big audience? Well, if you don't have a big audience, then have a town hall. Like, hey, I thank you so much for listening to this show. I'm always happy that you picked this time in your week to listen to me. I want to let you know, I want to make this show like the best show ever for you. But I need your help. So I'm letting you know in 3 weeks on Thursday night, we're going to get together for an hour on Zoom. And if you would like to help me shape this show for you, I would really love to know what you would like to hear. My question of the month right now at the School of Podcasting, based on Tom Webster's book, is, all right, seriously, don't think about it. When I say, what would you like to hear Dave talk about on the show? What is it? And that came from, I was coaching Todd the Gator, and he said, I asked him that question. I'm like, what would you like to hear on the School of Podcasting? And he said, oh man, I'm sure you've covered it. It's, you've got 900 episodes. And I was like, no, seriously, like, what would you like to hear? And so that's what I'm doing. That's kind of a poll there for my audience. And what I'm going to do, because there are a lot of podcast consultants that listen to the School of Podcasting, instead of going, hey, all this market research I did for me about a show about here you go. No, I'm not going to do that, because, you can do your own marketing. I'm going to take it. If somebody asks me a question and I have covered it in the past and I don't have anything new, I will send them the link to that episode, and then I will thank them in the show. Hey, so-and-so asked this question. We did cover it. Here it is. But if I have something new to bring to the table, then I'll thank them in that show. And so it's just an idea to get them going.
Down at the very bottom of that too, you can just ask them. I'd love to have a one-on-one conversation with you. I mean, if your audience is that small, you could probably have 5 or 10 one-on-one conversations in a week, 15, 20 minutes. Make the show. If they come back to you and they give you ideas, just take them and run with them, because that's your audience. That's your most engaged listener. If you have a small audience and you say, I'd like to talk to you, and they actually say yes, they are the most engaged listener. Now, usually though, sometimes my experience has been they ask you for a bunch of things you can't deliver on, or they ask you for a bunch of things to do that you don't want to do. So you gotta weigh those. The deeper you get in the weeds with people, the more they feel like the more you listen to them, the more they think you're going to do what they say you're going to do, which is another little bit of a drawback, because sometimes you have to say, oh, well, thank you, I may not be able to do any of those. And people don't understand that. This is in the space I'm in, this happens all the time. They're like, 5 years ago, I told you to do this. Why didn't you do it? And you're like, well, because we didn't. Yeah. Like, we just didn't. It didn't fit what we were trying to do. So be careful isn't the right word, but go in eyes wide open the more feedback you ask for, and the more you get, the more they kind of expect you to take it and set expectations.
Yeah, that's a great point. So maybe say, hey, I would love your feedback. And, we have our kind of path of where we're going. We can't go everywhere, but we'd love to see what you're expecting from that. And if we can incorporate it, we will. And if we can't, maybe we can point you towards a show that, gives you what you want. So, and then here's the thing. Stephanie says, now I'm afraid no one will come to my town hall. Notice I said in 3 weeks, and it might be 2 months. Give it some time. Put it on the calendar. You can go to, oh crap, I should know this link. I think it's addtocalendar.com. There is a free version, and you can go set up the Zoom link and then have a link so that when people go to it, there's a page and they can add it to their calendar. And this is where your email comes in handy as well. You can say, hey, don't forget, next week, Thursday at 7, we're all getting together and having a powwow. But I'm here to tell you, every time I do a question of the month, there is a voice in the back of my head that goes, what if nobody answers? And I had one that I worded the question really poorly, and we had like 2 answers. And I was like, well, that almost happened. And if it happens, I'm like, okay, that was on me. I guess I asked that, or I don't know my audience, and I asked a question that made no sense or things like that. But here's the beauty of it. What if 2 people show up? Those 2 people, John Lee Dumas, who's this like millionaire, he made so much money in podcasting and moved to Puerto Rico, to avoid paying some of the taxes on that. And his first meetup was at a In-N-Out Burger, and he had 6 people. So, I made the mistake. I think I've talked about this on this show where I made the mistake. I went to email 10 people from my list saying, hey, I need your help. I want to get some feedback on the show. And instead of going to 10 people, it went to my entire list. And so for 2 weeks, I had back-to-back 20-minute meetings with people. And it was awesome because you get to see your audience. And, there's some guys in Oklahoma that I do not want to get mad at me because I just remember he had a wall of guns behind him. And I'm like, note to self, make sure Earl is not upset with the show. So it's kind of tricky that way. But it was really one of the best mistakes I've ever made because I really got to see who my audience is. Jody says, my problem is I can't mention it on my podcast because my podcast comes out 2 to 3 months after I do the interview, but I could see using social media. Well, you can announce it though in this week's episode. So if you're putting out a show this week that you recorded 3 weeks ago, somewhere in there go, hey, we're doing a town hall. It's, what is this, August? It's August. Holy cow, it's August. It's in November. We're going to do a Thanksgiving town hall, and because I'm thankful for you, dear listener, and I want to make sure I'm giving you the best. So put it out there months ahead of time, and that way you can get people to remember it. They'll, hey, did you sign up yet for the big town hall we're having, or whatever you want to call it, office hours for me probably, and so it's one of those things. And here's the thing, if it fails and nobody shows up, you just go to the next episode and you're like, hey, I want to thank everyone who showed up for the meeting last week. It was great. Had a fun time doing nothing with no one in the back of your head. I'll let you know when the next one is. You don't have to go, well, that was a big mistake. I feel like an idiot. But just somebody's going to show up. Somebody will show up because there's somebody that when you say, hey, I'm going to be live and I want to talk to you, and this is weird because you're just you and you're you, but there's somebody that's like, wow, I can talk to Jody Krangle live? Holy cow. Wait, Stephanie's going to be on Zoom? This is cool. So somebody will do it, even if it's one. And it's really cool. I had a pod page. I'm now doing coaching. And my favorite, this woman was from Scotland. And so I'm helping her through some stuff. And again, most of this is kind of not super low hanging fruit, but they just didn't know it was under that menu and this and that. And she's got this, she's not quite Mrs. Doubtfire, but she's got kind of this Scottish accent going on. And she's like, oh, it's good to have a Dave in your life, And I was like, excellent. So, but it really, when you can see your audience, it makes it easier than when I'm talking to my invisible
for
friend.
Sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. When people ping me for the day job and they got a question or whatever, I'm like, can we just get on a call? it's a lot easier to chat with them, answer their question, work with them that way in 15 or 20 minutes. And the impact of that call of the one-on-one, I had one scheduled for Friday. Actually it was scheduled for Thursday. At the end, he was like, "Hey, I'm going to be on the road. Can we take this on the phone?" And I was like, "Well, I really like to see you. I like
Yeah.
video. Can we do it when you're not so rushed?" Right. And he was like, "Oh yeah, we can do it on Monday." So I just prefer, I think it's a super powerful technique to get them on the phone, or to get them on a call, get on video. Now, some people will fight that, and that's okay. I'm just saying, in most cases, I like to see them. Creates a great atmosphere, just a better experience. I just win more often than I lose when I connect with them one-on-one.
Yeah, and if you're using something like Buzzsprout or Captivate, you can always do a pre-roll. I like Mark Maron's pre-rolls sometimes because it's like, "Hey folks, today's show is brought to you by Squarespace. Find it at blah 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 and then squarespace.com." It's like 10 seconds. And it could be like, "Hey, if you signed up for the big town hall, we're having it November 12th. You got to find out. We're going to help make the show to get, and then make a link. Go to mywebsite.com/townhall or whatever, a focus group or whatever you want to name it." So yeah, so if you're using something with dynamic content, you can do that. Randy Black says, "I once did a book giveaway that no one entered, but I still announced a winner." When I was doing the Akron podcast, I had a restaurant give me three $20 gift certificates. And I was like, "Hey, who wants Jamaican blah, blah, blah? It's on Market Street. I got him here. First person to email me." And I did that for like a month and a half. And I was like, "Well, I guess I'm eating Jamaican," because I was like, "You don't want it.
Nobody wanted it, huh?
Yeah. So I was like,
or you weren't reaching the right audience. That was too, right?
Yeah. Well, and that seriously, that show had like 32 downloads an episode because every time I started it, either COVID or some really nasty police event would come in and just take over the news, where our Akron Police Department shot this one poor kid 42 times. And there were all sorts of riots and, cries for justice. And and so I was like, well, that's what everybody wants to talk about. But this is supposed to be about finding new hidden gems in Akron, Ohio. And I was like, yeah. So
this is supposed to be a happy occasion.
Yeah, exactly. So, so it's kind of tricky, but give it a shot. And, if nothing else, how are you going to know if it doesn't work? How are you going to know if nobody shows up or not? And just set your expectations. I bet nobody's going to show up. And then when nobody shows up, you won't be disappointed. But, oh my gosh, 2 people showed up. Holy cow. And, think about it this way. If we go with the rule of 3%, if you have 100 people listening, you might have 3 people. And that would be awesome. Because to me, the smaller, the better in a way. Because now I can really, instead of getting, kind of generic answers, I can go deeper and like, well, what do you do? Like, tell me more about you. Because again, Tom Webster's book, The Audience is Listening, he talks about how, he had a great point. Again, a lot of great points, but how the more you really know who your audience is, so it's not just, it's women in their 30s. It's like, no, it's Carol. She's 34. She has 3 kids, 8, 12 and 14. Their minivan is purple, and she just got the one with the cool door that opens automatically. She works at a blah, blah. She works at the local fabric store, like really, so that you can answer the question, this is who this is, is Carol going to like this? Now I have the advantage. I know like Ken Blanchard listens. I know that Kim Craggy listens. I know a few people that listen. There are times when I'm like, is Ken going to like this? I was like, well, Ken's been doing it a while. This might be a little too, and that's my problem. Like if I was coaching me, I'd go, look, Dave, you can't be advanced podcasting and intro to podcasting. Mm-hmm. Some of that audience is going to go, you got to pick
you could go every other week, to be honest, though. You could, and you could be clear about that. You could be like, hey, I'm going to cover, just so you guys know, I'm going to cover an intro this week and I'm going to do advanced next week. And we're just going to rotate that. So do you run the risk of your advanced folks not listening to the intro? Maybe, but some of them would be like, hey, I don't want to miss something. I'll listen to the first part to see if I already got it. So you could split your audience, that just set the expectation and then stick to it, so they know, like, okay, this week is going to be an entry level topic. Next week's going to be advanced, and they'll adjust. They'll adjust and adapt to it. So now, if you start getting some negative feedback on it, and you get a lot, then all of a sudden you realize maybe that negative feedback it could be either way. It could be your beginning folks saying too many advanced topics, or it could be your advanced folks saying, Dave, you're covering everything I've already done. If you start getting that kind of feedback, you have to consider, okay, maybe that was a bad decision, and I'm going to go back to a 2-to-1, 2 advanced to 1 beginning, or 3-to-1, something like that.
Yeah, anytime I do something that's very 101, I announce at the beginning, this one is for beginners. This is for the people that don't have a podcast, because I don't want to waste the time of people who are past that already. So that's something to do. The Daily
Jody
Sport-
makes a great
Go ahead.
comment, real quick. Jody makes a comment. She says, my experience with giveaways has been less than stellar.
Yeah.
And I think this is where your audience really matters. On Home Gadget Geeks, we did a bunch of contests to give away gadgets. And I didn't realize my audience is the demographic skews towards a lot of older guys like me who have a lot of disposable income, and they're not going to jump through a bunch of hoops for a giveaway. There's like, if I want it, I'll just go buy it. And so it was, you're like, oh yeah, hey, we're going to give this thing away. They're like, nah, I just rather buy it. And it's easier. I don't want to do your Twitter, do your Facebook thing, send these out, do that. I don't want to be a circus monkey. I just want to listen to the show. So even that may be a signal, Jody, that may be a signal to you, like, okay, if giveaways aren't there, maybe my audience isn't motivated by that way. They're more motivated by getting the value from your podcast easier, right? Get right to it. Don't worry about sponsorships from trying to give stuff away. Don't spend the majority of your time doing that. So I think kind of figuring out your audience's habits. Sometimes some of those shows, the giveaways, the stickers on YouTube are out of control right now. Everybody's sharing stickers and sending stuff and do this, and you're like, okay. So I think your audience demographic will dictate our giveaways or stickers or tchotchkes. Is that what you call them?
Yeah.
Those little things. I think that will determine whether those things are successful tonight. You got to try. If it doesn't work, scrap it. I gave away these 3D printed Home Gadget Geeks. There's one there's one up by my head. I gave those away for Patreon folks, and then asked at one point, anybody want one? And I don't know, I gave away maybe 10, and then it was like, nah, I'm good. Like, I don't need another thing. I don't need another gadget thing sitting on my desk, right? Type deal. Although Dan sent me this based on a true story podcast coaster, and it was super cool. And so I was like, oh, this sits on my desk. The coffee mug sits on it. They match. Hold on, I'll show look how cool that is. Anyways, so for me, it was just now. Maybe I'm not, I don't know, Dan, am I your typical listener? I thought it was pretty cool. Would I jump through some hoops for a coaster? Maybe. Yeah. Right. So you got to figure out your audience on that.
There are those people like DR. This is what am I going to do with a sticker? That's true. And I will say though, I did love that show.
Out of control.
Yeah. You put them on the back of your iPad. But I did love that one show, Joni Loves Tchotchkes. That was awesome.
Nicely
exactly.
done, Dad.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. He's like Beetlejuice. You say his name and he shows up. Reverend Ken Blanchard. I just said, would Ken like this? So he's giving us 2 thumbs up, and the chat room is going insane. Chris, we are going to talk about your microphone eventually. Chris says we've done a lot with gear giveaways. They usually bring a lot of people who want free stuff and don't end up being true fans. My band, the Sugar Daddies, way back in the day, we had free kitchen magnets that I went to Office Max, and they were business card size magnets. I printed my own business cards that just said the Sugar Daddies jumping, jiving, and crying the blues, and had our website on it, and literally handmade, stuck them on the magnet, glued them, and mailed them out. And it was a free sticker. And somehow we got on a list of people that want free stuff. And I'm like, why am I sending a magnet to North Carolina? Like we've barely played Canton, Ohio. We've never even made it to Kentucky, but people wanted it. So I had to take it down because I was like, wait a minute, I'm putting out money here for, I don't think these people are, going to town on it. Let's see here. Someone, oh wait, we'll do that one. Stephanie said,
hold on. It so depends, Dave, though, on these tchotchkes, right? I mean,
right.
like I think about some of the things I've gotten, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. Like, so I got this. This is a Channel 9. It's a foam thing, right? I got from Microsoft
Okay.
when I was out on campus. I stopped by the Channel 9 studios, and to me, like, well, first they don't call it that anymore, and two, there were very few of these. And so like you had to get you had to be there. They had gotten them and they were giving them out to people who came through the studio. You couldn't get it any other way. I went to the studio because I wanted to see how Microsoft, they had just spent like $1 million redoing their studio. So I wanted to see what they had done. And I was lucky enough on an MVP trip to go to walk through the Channel 9 studios. And as I left, they gave me this. Well, this is a reminder to me of my time there, right? The time I got to spend with them and stuff. I leave it up. Does it have any function? No. Is it kind of ugly? Totally. Like it's not the most interesting thing, but it's for me, right? For me, it's important. Oh yeah. Yeah, no, right on.
So it's full of pens.
No, you're not going to hit a home run with every single one. It's, for some people, it's going to mean more than others, right?
I've got a Cap Show coaster here. So
yeah.
A very dusty.
It's good marketing in some cases. It's good. It's good. Listen, this coaster from Dan always sits on my desk. The Based on True Story podcast, I use it here, but I also meet with Ed Sullivan on Sunday afternoons. And I pour my Guinness in it. It keeps things not only hot but cold. So it's a great reminder, I think, sometimes to get that stuff in front of your audience. Sometimes it'll work for them. Sometimes it won't. Sometimes you need to send it to them for free, right? Sometimes you don't need to. You just need to send it to them. Or have it available if you're in a spot for folks who come to your location, you give them something like this. This has sat on my desk for, I think it's been 8 years since I would. In fact, so much so it's channel9 .msdn.com, which I think the MSDN stuff is gone at Microsoft. So anyways, these can be powerful reminders.
Rich says there's a difference between a tchotchke and branded merch. Yeah, it's kind of cool when you get something that's handy. It's out of my reach, but I have a little, looks like a thumb drive, but out of the thumb drive it's a USB cable, it's a USB-C cable, it's a USB little squiggly thing. It's all these different connectors. So if I want to charge something, I can plug in the USB thing into my brick, and then I've got 3 things. It's a really useful tool, and it's from Angel Studios, who are the people that make the Chosen, because I bought their DVD set, and in that they gave you a little thing. So yeah.
Hey, by the way, if you have a favorite gift that you ever gotten, leave it in the comments below on YouTube. We'd love to hear about your favorite gift that you've gotten, maybe from a podcaster or a YouTuber.
Yeah, I have a Jody says I give you a thank you gift. Yes, I have Jody's mug in my kitchen. I have for the record, people, I appreciate them. I use them in the winter for hot chocolate, but I've never graduated to the coffee generation. So I have a lot of mugs that just sit there, and I'm like, oh wait, I need to make some. When you get a cold and you have to put that weird yellow tablet in to dissolve, and it's whatever that is, the cold medicine stuff. I'll use a mug for that.
Not NyQuil. No, Alka-Seltzer.
Well, Alka-Seltzer, but that's not it. But it's Alka-Seltzer-esque.
Okay.
Oh man, that's gonna drive me nuts. Something like Cold Be Gone, or I don't know what it is. But anyway.
Is that like the Walmart brand, or I've never heard of that one. They come up with the greatest names for their generic products.
Yeah. Stephanie says, I hosted a field trip to see the art of an artist I interviewed, and I was surprised folks showed up. There you go. Maybe they'll show up. I'm going to try it again this month. So much of this stuff is experimenting. Exactly. A lot of podcasting is experimenting, and sometimes it works. And sometimes, you're like, oh, let me try this. Okay, maybe I won't do that again. Todd the Gator, I did a Valentine's Day contest in my Discord community. posting now and then couples pictures, and it was so great to see the faces. I still have the actual pictures. If you go into my YouTube and find older videos, my background used to be, I went to my audience and said, hey, do me a favor, wherever you are, take your phone, do a selfie, and send that to schoolofpodcasting@gmail.com. And I had a picture of Steve Stewart painting something. I had one guy mowing the lawn. I had Jen from podcasting, the interview place, interview connections, Jessica. And she was like in the meat section of her grocery store. But it really, and for the longest time, I thought, wow, my audience is entirely made up of old dudes with beards. And then finally, Kim Craggy and Jessica and, the story behind Emily, Pro Cop, so I finally got some people in it. But it was great. That used to be my backdrop. So anytime I was like, I'm not sure, I just turn around and like, oh, well, they'll like it. So it is.
I remember that wall of pictures back there. And you could kind of see him, but you couldn't see him when you were on. But it was and it was a face. You kind of not phase in a way like children phase, but for you did it for a while and then you changed it to something different. It doesn't have to stay forever.
Yeah. Jeff C says my giveaway to eCamp's Creator Camp, which I'll be at, by the way, was popular at the beginning, but then died out. I'm assuming it will pick back up right before the cutoff for the drawing. Yep, absolutely. That is the case too. When I do the question of the month and I'm like, hey, you got to get it in by the 26th, I get like 12 on the 25th. It's because I'm always like, well, what am I going to do for the episode? And then somebody had asked about, do you share these on social? Sure. Why not? Stephanie says, but maybe I don't want to share that I'm listening to a weight loss podcast to my Instagram story. I could see that. If you're like, hey, share this with a friend and you'll get an extra vote or something like that. That's always fun. You do have to be, you were talking earlier about sometimes people will ask you, like they'll give you feedback. Like we had that one guy that gave us like 3 pages of stuff and he wanted us to turn this show into an interview show. And we're like, hey, thanks for the feedback. But, I'm sorry, and Ralph,
not why we show up on Saturday mornings.
Yeah.
Not why we're
Ralph does a Christian finance show. And he said, somebody asked him to do a show on how to commit tax evasion. And that would get a lot of downloads probably. But
well, you probably don't want to promote illegal things in your podcast, right?
So let's see.
Maybe tax tips. Maybe legal tax tips would be appropriate. Yeah.
Well, that's what a lot of his show is. It's tax tips and things of that nature. So
right on.
Yeah. So we're saying, let's see. Randy says, whatever happened to Emily? She's still around. She just friended me on Threads. So she's still around, still editing audio as far as I know. So she's always great too. I'm hoping she'll be at podcast.
See her on Instagram too from time to time.
I know she got really into roller skating for a while.
Yeah.
And I was like,
that was great. It was fun to watch her progression she started and then get better and better and better on that. Yeah.
Yeah. They, Chris says, I'm going to send my guests lighters so they can light their Blue Yeti on fire. I like that idea. And Dan makes a great point. Marketing is 99% trial and error.
And what works today may not work tomorrow, and what didn't work today might work tomorrow. That's the maddening thing about it, right? You might just hit, you might get lucky. It's like gold when you're digging for gold. You might hit a vein today, and then you go, and then it's gone. And then you might dig for a long time and not find anything. And so it just takes marketing, because you're dealing with humans, and humans are chaos. And they're not only they're chaos, they're also driven by trends. And so some trends that may be hot today, you decide to jump on that trend, then that trend goes out super fast, and you're like, wow, where did that go? So it is a little maddening. You got to kind of stick with it. Dave, you and I have both been we have a show that we've both been doing a long time. I'm 13 or 14 years into Home Gadget Geeks now. School podcasting, how long school podcasting been around? How many years have you done school podcasting, Dave?
19.
19, right? So think of all the trends that have come and gone and think about, there's still some things though. Do you think, when you think about school podcasting, do you see a thread of consistency throughout the whole thing that hasn't changed in the 19 years? I mean, is there something about that show that hasn't changed in there? Something small, something, the way you do something, has there been any consistency in it all the way through, even if it's small?
I'm trying to think, because the intro has changed. The original shows had this guy going, "The School of Podcasting." Wow.
Yeah.
If the power goes out, like my house is,
Oh, I just heard of the thunder.
yeah, my it's vibrating my butt. So that's fun. So the intro's changed. Because originally I was like, this is the podcast that talks about all things podcasting, and then it
Yeah.
was, this is where
Yeah.
we help you face your fears, face your fears, tackle the technology, and flatten the learning curve, or something like that. That was my call to action for a while. The ladies came in somewhere, I don't know where. So the only thing, and
Yeah.
even schoolofpodcasting.com, my really early shows, I don't know why I did this. I had the school stuff, the courses was at schoolofpodcasting.com. The podcast was driving people to schoolofpodcasting.net. And when I hear that, I go, what was I thinking? So I don't know if anything, the logos changed.
Mondays,
So,
you're all, I know,
yeah, always on
you
Mondays.
always on Mondays, right?
Yeah,
so there it
that's
is.
one.
There it is. There's your thing. My intro has changed a little bit, but it's kind of the same. 616 episodes is something pretty similar. And I think I've always been live on Thursday nights. I don't have a release schedule, but I think we've been live at the same time Thursday nights since the very beginning. So there's those things, but very few, I guess my point is in the long term, very few, if you do this for a while, very few of the things that you did early you're gonna do later. You're constantly changing your process there. You're learning, you're growing. You yourself grow. You figure out, oh, like you just said, you're like, God, why did I point it to schoolofpodcasting.net? That was dumb. And I go back and I've listened to a few of the early ones, and I'm like, oh, Jim, don't say it that way, type deal, So it's I think it's those learn and grow processes that you just have to go through. Sometimes they're painful to change, sometimes they're easy to change. And I think sometimes it's good. I challenge everybody listening, whether you're listening live or you're listening to the recorded version, I challenge you this week, go back to something you did early. Like, and this is maybe not even a bad exercise if you're feeling down about yourself. Go back to something you did early and say, wow, have I grown? And hopefully you have in that. But listen to it, critique yourself, figure out some things, or maybe say, man, I really did that right. I need to get back to that. But go back and listen to something early.
Yeah, Ralph points out, even my voice has changed. It's a little deeper, that whole 9
Yeah,
yards.
I think we all get, especially the guys, we all get a little deeper as we get older.
Yeah.
Or I think maybe we relax. That might be the biggest thing. You start your podcast, you're all cranked up. Hey, we're gonna do this thing today. You're all excited, and it tenses your vocal cords. Then maybe you start to relax and you slow down a little bit. You get comfortable with the microphone. You're not so jittery. You're not so worried about things. And I think that relaxes you. And so our voices deepen a little bit.
Chris says the Flaming Yeti sounds like a great drink at the bar.
Ooh,
or just a bar.
What you put in it.
Yeah. What are you doing Thursday? We're going down to the Flaming Yeti. Like, oh, I love that place.
I wonder what kind of drink you'd put. Maybe that's a good put in the comments below. What drinks?
That's it.
What alcohol would you use?
Jeff says, when people send me swag with my name on it, that is so much better than their logo. Yeah, when you make it personal, it's like, oh, that's pretty cool. Let's see, Todd the Gator. I have giveaways all the time with the show mouse pads or T-shirts. They're gamers, is his audience, right? Guardian Downcast. But I always send a question card. And I write personal notes. That's a key from Taylor Swift. Personal notes, handwritten. I don't care if you wrote it with your feet, handwritten, thanking them for their participation and listening. Yep, that's a good one. And then Randy, his founder. Looks like Emily has a new podcast. That's hysterical. Now get out. So I'll have to find that.
Nice.
And let's see. Stephanie asks, has this show this show has always been weekly, as has been the School of Podcasting. And everybody else might start weekly. Like right now, your podcast website, I've kind of not run out, but I'm getting close to running out of like the easy tips. And so now I'm going to have to do some research to talk about a tool or a strategy. And I'm like, oh, I might have to go to every other week, because I could go, look, here's the thing. I'm going to read the copy from their website. Yay. Well, okay. Did I really save you any time on that? So, but it's awesome to, like we said, when you're doing these surveys, to get to know your audience. And speaking of getting to know your audience, it's about this time that we're going to say thank you to our awesome supporters, including awesome people, of course, like our newest one, of course, is Randy over at M2, as in the number 2, M2H2music.com. That's Mott Music for a half hour. Thank you for upping your subscription to $20 a month as an awesome supporter. You should be like Randy. He's really cool. And he's got some really cool music in there if you want to check it out, especially if you have an eclectic mix. I like everything. Check it out. But you could be an awesome supporter. And of course, the show is brought to you by the School of Podcasting, where you get courses, coaching, and community. And that coaching is unlimited. And Satiros,
Unlimited. Is it
Yes.
really, Dave? Really?
It is. It's real.
All right.
And people
Okay.
don't get it. But Satiros signed up yesterday, got group coaching on Friday, and we've got an hour set today after I listened to a show, and I'm going to be like, this is good. He doesn't have an about page. There are a couple other things that I saw that were really low-hanging fruit. And I was like, and speaking of your about page, we'll take a quick tangent of thanking our supporters. On your about page, put your name. A lot of times you will write that in first person, and I'm like, the show started in 2022 when I did this and did blah, 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 and you're writing in first person. And then if somebody searches for your name podcast, you don't come up because you didn't put your name in the about page. So
You want it for generative AI as well.
yeah,
So you want to make sure for the generative AI bots that are going out there, they're going to want to know your name. Doesn't matter. In fact, I need to check. I'm going to check while you finish
while you
this
do
up.
that. Yeah. So those are the kind of fun-filled tips you get at the School of Podcasting. And this show runs on, as I click the next button, Pod Page. And the cool thing, everybody says, oh, you just like Pod Page because you work there. I can go look at the hundreds of episodes on Ask the Podcast Coach, where I've been promoting Pod Page for years. If you want to check it out, podpage.com. Or if you go to trypodpage.com, that's my affiliate link. I have a free course at learnpodpage.com. And today we're back to my favorite, Ecamm. If you want to check out Ecamm for live streaming, if you're on a Mac, it's askthepodcastcoach.com/Ecamm. Because it's good. It's ECAMM. I should just have Ecamm as well as a link, just for those people that missed the second M. And if you want more Jim Cullison, and who doesn't? Because, I mean, look. And his shirt matches his logo today, which is even more fun.
Ooh, nicely done.
Check
Not supposed to.
check him out at theaverageguy.tv. And he's so dedicated, he has a generator. So, like, you will never miss an episode with Jim. He's got you covered. And it's time to show our fun-filled, yes, our favorite time, of course, which is there we go. The Wheel o' Names. So will it be Glenn? Will it be Max? Will it be Ross? Will it be Ralph or Craig? Or I sound like I'm on Romper Room. I see Jody. I see, everybody. But let's spin that wheel.
That was kind of creepy.
It was kind of creepy. And it is, well, you mentioned him earlier. He's like Beetlejuice.
Boom. Yep.
Ed Sullivan, soniccupcake.com. He's an editor. So if you're like, I wish I could find somebody to, get this off my plate, go over to soniccupcake.com. Ed will make you sound amazing. And he's a really good guy. I haven't talked to Ed in forever, but always
Still a good guy.
Still a
really
good guy. Yeah. And
Makes me laugh a lot when we meet. Yeah.
there you go. So does this show, the one you're listening to right now, does it save you time? Does it save you money? Does it save you headaches? Does it keep you educated? Did it make you laugh, cry, think, groan, educate, or entertain? Well, then you should give some of that value back. Go over to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome and become an awesome supporter, and we will give you a big shout out, just like we did for Randy today. And you're like, Randy? Yeah, the guy over at M2H2 Music So thanks to all of our awesome supporters. We really do appreciate that. And somehow, oh, there we go. It's like I lost
And
my.
if it did save you any of those things, tell us in the comments below. We'd like
That's
to
it.
know what is just to see how the other week, Dave. I'm going to say I'm disappointed with our audience really quick. So it's about the other week I joked about that and I said leave some comments for some things. Nothing. We got
Nada.
nothing, and nobody. It's like, so maybe they know I'm joking about it, and so they don't do it. But if you're listening or watching on YouTube, leave us a few comments below. Some of these things we'd like to hear from you on. It'd be nice to get a few comments down there, and it helps out the YouTube algorithm. So thanks for doing that.
And if you've already consumed Randy's episode, well, he's got a new episode of the M2H2 show coming out later this afternoon. You can check it out again at m2h2music.com. And he's been very patient. Mr. Chris Nessie had a question about the SM7B. What's the deal, or what are the ideal settings on the back of the mic? I think it really, I know it's a podcast question. It kind of depends. And do I have my SM7? My SM7B ran away from home. It used to be right behind me. I don't know where it is.
Great. That'd have been great if you just would have grabbed it and be like,
I
it's
know.
right here. That would have been awesome.
I know it's here because I was going to show.
You know what you need is a shelf, Dave. You need a shelf that's just off of your shot there, like so we can't see it, but it would have all that gear lined up for you, so you could just.
You guys want to see? Let's peel. This is why Dave's always zoomed in so much. My office is a wreck. It's a mess, and so let's do this because you will see. Especially, oh, am I okay? I'm not locked up. Okay, so let me do this, and we will zoom out a pinch. And oh, what is that nonsense? That's not good.
It's awesome, is what it is.
Yeah, so it's like Monica's closet on Friends. It's like that's not good. But somewhere in here is an SM7B. Honestly, I thought it was right here, and I'm like, okay, because I put it on a couple weeks ago, and I was like, I kind of like that other mic. But anyway, back to the question. One is a bass cut, and one is this is definitely on YouTube, and one is a kind of sibilance boost. And so you flip a switch and go, this is me with the bass cut. And then you flip it up, and this is me with the bass boost and a treble boost. And this is me, just, record the 4 options and then vote with your ears. But I forget what mine, I'm really like, who loses an SM7B? I'm like, I got an MV7 behind me, but I don't know what's going on with that. But yeah, that's what they do. One's a bass boost, one's a, kind of treble boost. And then, there's, if you turn them both off, it's flat or something like that. So, but for me, I still pop this microphone, but I noticed the minute I put the SM7B back on, I was like, oh, I need to adjust my mic technique because I was popping that. And I even I think I had the big giant windscreen that's like the size of your head. And I was like, And this one allows me to tweak, it comes with the Rode software that you can kind of tweak it. And what's the best microphone for you? The one that you put on your headphones and you go, oh, I like the way I sound. It's really, and it's, and it sounds good. So we were talking earlier. Oh, and today we'll be using the YouTube audio as I look over to add a chapter mark in it. I never pushed record on the Rodecaster. So I do have Ecamm, so that's good. So I've got Ecamm and YouTube. But anyway, Ralph asked a question because we're talking about me having kind of 2 audiences. So I guess the question is, should we make our content for the new listener or the returning listener? I asked because my show, I tend to do my entry-level topics instead of deep tax issues. Jim, comments on this one? I don't know. It's it does come down to who is my audience and who am I trying to attract. So with Ralph, he's trying to get tax, clients. So maybe intro stuff would get people who are really new to tax stuff. And if you do a deep dive, you kind of do one of those like, look at me, I am an expert. I understand, compound financing interest rate, blah, 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 more financial
Yeah.
gobbledygook.
Yeah.
So,
I think we get the opportunity to do both.
Yeah.
And you can switch me back in if you want,
oh, that would be
Yeah.
good.
I thought maybe the
as we
audience would
watch
see the audience.
as we watch Dave play with the buttons, this is entertaining to watch. Thank you.
No, I thought maybe they were like, "Hey, where'd Jim go?" I thought
Yeah.
maybe you'd see it popping back in. It's okay. It's in this show we get to do both because some ask basic questions, some ask advanced questions. I think we talked about this earlier in the show. You could be specific and target and say, hey, this week's going to be for beginners or this week's going to be for advanced, or you could just do it. Like, I don't know if it's all that important because for some people, beginning things may be advanced and for some, advanced things may be for beginners. So I think you have to kind of figure out what the content is and then guess like, hey, how is my audience going to appreciate this? If you're a consistent variety show in where you're mixing it all up, don't feel the urge to call it out. They're already used to that. They're listening to it. Remember, the audience that's listening is listening because they like you and they like the format. So don't feel too inclined. And then you're like, yeah, but I can get new people. Yeah, but the cost of getting new people is way more expensive than just keeping the ones you have. They're already there. They already like you. They already like your format. I think sometimes we overthink this a little too much. Like, well, yeah, I could kind of tweak this and you're like, yeah, you could pick up 2 and lose 50. So is that the smart thing to do? So be cautious in your swinging changes as you're thinking about doing things. Be cautious with those. Be judicious in the way you go about doing that because it's important. Remember, like I said, they're listening to you because they were attracted to the show and they stayed. That's a super hard thing to do, is to get people to listen and stay. So the most important audience you have isn't the one you don't have. It's the one you currently own, right? It's the one you currently have that are listening. They're super important to you, right? So be careful with those format changes if you're going to go about that, and don't overthink it. Just keep going. If you get a lot of negative feedback, like, yeah, well, maybe it's time for them to move on, right? Maybe it's time, because letting one person go is certainly a lot better than changing a format and losing 50, right? Over the format.
That's it.
For sure.
Somebody asked that in Reddit, and they were like, how do you grow your audience, blah, blah, blah. And I basically said, there are more ways to measure your success than downloads. I measure my success for the School of Podcasting based on how many new members I get. I judge kind of the success of this one on either members or Patreon. When I look at our download numbers are all over the place with this show. It really is. And so I said I would rather have a smaller engaged audience than 5,000 people who could take me or leave me. I'm like, I want people that are part of the community and keep going on. So Ralph says, I answer listener questions every day, so I guess that will continue to drive the content. Yeah, and the School of Podcasting does a little more on making your content better, because I think that's the key. That's really where it starts. And so I do more of that because a beginner and an intermediate person can kind of, do that. Like this month's episode is the question of the month. And it's about what was the last thing that you recommended to somebody and why. And I'll be interested to see, because I kind of made it like anything. Like the last thing I thought about that was I recommended the show The Boys on Amazon to my brother, because he and I both really enjoyed dark humor. And that show is so dark. There are parts of it you're like, wait, what did I just see? Holy cow. And I even went over the one night and watched the first episode with him. And it was like, here, the first one's free. Take this one. And it got him hooked. And the next thing you know, he's like, hey, man, new episodes are out, And so that's what I'm looking for. Like, why did you recommend it is really the question of the month. Not so much what did you recommend, but why. Because if we hear why people recommend, then, maybe it's for the super cold, Coke that people are recommending.
Full circle. Dave, let me ask you this question about this show.
Yeah.
If I were to ask you, who is our most engaged audience when you think about the listener of this program, and I said, how would you describe our most engaged listener? What comes to mind to you? I've got some thoughts, but what comes to mind to you if I asked you that question about this
That's
show?
a great question, because I go to Patreon, right?
Mm.
So the Flame
Mhm.
Alive people and Max
Yeah.
Trescott and Chris Stone is here every week in the chat room, right? We've got
Yeah.
Coach Dave, and we've got Dan from Based on a True Story podcast, and those are the names that come to my head. That I'm like,
Yeah.
these are the people that are the chat. I mean, they are here every week. It's Saturday
Yeah.
morning at 10:30 on the East Coast, and we're sitting here talking about podcasting.
Mhm.
But then we
Mhm.
also have podcast consultants, right? So DR's a consultant. She's listening to us. David Hooper, I know, pops in every now and then. He'll send me a text like, "Hey, that was a good episode last Saturday." So he's listening. So it is, but it's people. I don't know that we have a ton of people who are starting their podcast. These are hence the podcast coach. People are asking podcasting questions.
Yeah.
And while how do I start a podcast is a podcasting question, I think 95% of this audience already has one, and that's why they're asking, like, should I use Cast-O-Matic or not Cast-O-Matic, Cast-Magic or Capshow or Pod Squeeze, right? They're talking about tools and things like that. What comes to your mind?
Well, I mean, I think if I were to think, and I'm going to do something pretty risky, and I'm going to talk about order of importance in my mind. And so please understand, like, I'm not important. No, you're all important to me. But as I think about those levels of engagement, certainly the folks who allow us to separate money from them are really, really engaged. So you think about the $20 supporters, and by the way, I don't see any of this money. So this is coming from my love of Dave Jackson. So the folks who support Dave through Patreon or the super chats that pop in, right? They're really engaged because it takes a lot for people to separate themselves from their money. So that, I think, as we think about those people, that's the super important group. The second group is this, and there's some overlap in this, right? The folks that come, like DR says, they're your super fans. Yeah. That come out every Saturday morning to be in this chat room. You guys are important to us. We take your feedback very, very seriously. And the show oftentimes is built around your feedback in what we do. So to us, when I think of getting feedback, when I hear stuff, I'm gonna really put a lot of weight in those Patreon folks. I'm gonna put a lot of weight on what we see on Saturday mornings, right? And then the listeners that come in through the regular podcast channel that you guys are listening to this download. Some of you, though, even in that listener, the folks that send feedback in, man, that's really super important. And then I probably put our YouTube folks in fourth position. We don't get a lot of feedback from them, right? That the YouTube channel just doesn't get a lot in that. But those are all, I think that's an exercise that podcasters need to go through to kind of think through. Okay, where are my most engaged listeners, and do I know who they are? We have the benefit because of Patreon. We know exactly who they are. Because of the chat room, we know exactly who they are in doing this. And it helps us, Dave, you and I, after the end of this show today, we usually spend a little bit of time debriefing on, hey, how'd it go? What worked? Did that go well? Last week at the end of the show, you're like, that's it. We're moving back to ECAM, right? I'm just more comfortable that way. And so I think that exercise of going through and physically saying to yourself, okay, who are the people that really drive what I'm trying to do? Who do I listen to? I'm hesitant to say they're more important because people get kind of bent out of shape when you say those kinds of words, but maybe they're just a higher priority when we think about their level of engagement and what they do for us. So, by the way, thank you to everyone who does support Dave via Patreon or the super chats in that. I deeply appreciate it. For me, it's a privilege to come out and hang out with Dave on Saturdays and just be a part of this community. I love it. That's why I've done it for, 7 years. Are we in the seven
I don't know.
market?
I think we're
8-year mark.
This is probably one of those where we're approaching 10 and we didn't realize. I need to go back and look. Honestly, don't know.
Maybe so. But it's it's important, I think, that you identify those groups.
Well, Dan is saying, paraphrasing Jim, the amount of effort listeners put into being engaged determines how much effort we as hosts put into their feedback. Am I understanding your position correctly?
Yeah, I think so. I think, listen, sometimes you get a bit of feedback from somebody, it's out of left field, you don't know who they are, but it's valid.
Right.
And you're like, oh yeah, I need to listen to that. I guess my point in all that is saying, do the mental exercise, maybe going back to what we talked about at the beginning of the show. Do the mental exercise of saying, who are my most engaged listeners? Do I know who they are? We know all these names that come in every Saturday, and I don't know why, but you guys keep coming back. It must be fun. We must be doing something right. If we did a radical format change, Dave, I think some of these folks would say, you know what? I'm not interested in it. I like coming in Saturday and doing what you guys do. That's why I'm here. So I don't know, paraphrase it, take what you want from it. I just think it's a smart idea to know your listeners and know where they fit into the feedback paradigm.
I'm trying to see. I think we have 23 people, I think, right now on YouTube.
Yeah.
So that's a classroom with people. And
Yeah.
DR says, I tell my husband I have a class on Saturday morning as I slip into my office and bring you up on the show. There you go.
Yeah.
And
We like hanging out with you too.
And if I don't want to call anybody, I don't think DR's an awesome supporter, and that's fine. I don't know everybody's situation.
You
but
don't have to be an awesome supporter to be in that list. She's here every single week.
Yeah. And there will be an invite today because we have live group coaching on Saturdays, and that's the one I invite the awesome supporters to. So, but it is fun to see the same people in that whole 9 yards. And I know a lot of people like, I just like our witty banter. Jim, we have witty banter, it turns out.
Witty is good. Witty's
Yeah.
good. I put that on my business card that doesn't exist anymore because nobody has business cards. Jim Collison, witty. That's what it says.
I am yesterday I was listening to James and Sam on Pod News Weekly, and I believe they referred to Brendan as a really fine bloke. And I go, dude, that needs to be your business card.
Really
Brendan
fine.
Mulligan, really fine bloke. Chris
Like
says, do you actively promote this? Ask the podcast coach. Do we promote that to new podcasters? Where one of the reasons it kind of got invented, as much as I go, I judge this by my Patreon numbers, it would kill me when I'd have somebody and they'd go, well, I want to hire you. And I'm like, okay, here's my hourly rate. And they'd go, and I'm like, well, I do offer, they didn't want to join the School of Podcasting because they hated memberships. Okay, well, here's my hourly rate. And they'd go, and for the record, I'm actually cheaper than most people. And I'm like, well, if you want free consulting, just wake up on Saturday mornings. And I would offer that. And yet I've never had anybody take me up on it. They're always like, I really need, I'm like, well, here's my hourly rate. And I'm like, but you can get it for free. You just got to get up a little early on Saturday morning. And so that was one of the reasons that in the actual reason why it's 10:30 on a Saturday is because at the time I needed to pick a time for a new show when my wife was still like drinking coffee or not up on a Saturday. So that's why I picked this time. And so,
and it was you were out there live streaming. For folks who don't know the story, many of you do, but Dave was out there and I saw him and he was trying to do this live streaming stuff. And I just popped in. You want somebody to talk to? And he was like, yeah, sure. Come on in. We did it 2 weeks in a row. And cause Saturday mornings were my time to produce Home Gadget Geeks. So I'd always be down here, working on show notes and stuff like that. And I remember you were like, hey, you want to do this on a regular basis? And I was like, yeah, I do. This would be awesome. And listen, I haven't been able to do it every single week either. That's one of those things, I've had commitments at work. I ran an internship program for a while. I have weekends where I'm gone, but we get most Saturdays. You get it done most Saturdays. Big thanks to everybody who's jumped into my place as well.
Yeah, I'll have to see. I don't think with Podcast Movement, I think I'm back in time to be back for Saturday. I'm going to Atlanta also this month because Atlanta and Nashville have two big podcast groups. So when I heard that Podfest was coming to Atlanta, and then I saw the plane tickets were $68, I'm like, done. So, and there you go. Super chat See,
Boom.
I wasn't
Boom.
trying to
You
call
guilted
yeah,
her into
I
that. You
did.
did. You
I'm like,
totally did. Yeah. You totally did.
she's an awesome
DR, you should not have given into that. But thank you for doing
Yeah.
that. We appreciate that.
Yeah.
You should not have felt guilty.
My mom would be proud. My mom had like a guilt ray. She could just look at you and you'd be like, okay, fine, I'll make my room.
Hey, what's the difference between guilting and influencing? I'm not sure. Maybe
yeah.
one's just a little softer than the other. I don't know.
Yeah, I get to meet Chris
thanks.
Stone from castahead.net in person. He'll be there. He's in Atlanta. So, yeah, it's a Podfest tour. I'm going to have to see because he's going all over the place. I'm like, I can't meet them all, but that is one of the nice things about working at Podpage is but before, in the early days of Libsyn, it was so awesome. My favorite line ever was the original president, Lori Sims. I said, hey, I've been asked to speak at this thing. Like, who's going? Dave Jackson School of Podcasting or Dave Jackson Libsyn employee? And she goes, where would you want to go that we wouldn't pay for it? I was like, I love my job. And I've kind of got that situation now. Brendan has given me a budget. And when the budget's out, then the School of Podcasting will pay for any flights. But I've got more than enough budget to hit Podfest and Podcast Movement, that whole 9 yards. And then I'm not sure I understand Randy's question. So you're saying that Gene finally engaged? I must have missed something that the chat room is talking about. I'm not quite sure of that. Jody says that they should come visit her in Toronto. I think they did Toronto one of the years because there was just a town hall for Podfest. And he was saying how they're international. They've been to the Philippines. They're going all over the world. And Chris just brought in 2 partners. So he didn't sell Podfest, but he sold a stake in it. And there's one guy. And what's great is that guy's a podcaster, and he's going to be like the operating officer. Chris is going to take over marketing and community, which is his strength. And there was another guy, and I forget what he is doing. I think sponsors is what they're going at. Oh, I get it. Yes, I was the guilt ray. Exactly. And then, of course, finally in Ohio, we have a Tim Hortons. She's, if I go there, there's a Tim Hortons and coffee and donut for you if you come to that. Yeah, so she says Podfest tours coming here. They came last year and the year before, yeah. So if you're near Toronto, head on up and say hi to Jody. And I'm not sure where Mark is. I know he's in Canada. And, Canada's not that big, so he's probably right next to, it's like Texas. You go, what? Houston, Fort Worth, and you're like, yeah, they're 6 hours apart. And you're in the same state, which still drives me crazy. Chris says, I should do an SOP episode that is a podcasting retrospective. I should start working on that now if I'm going to do that. Like 20 years. I'm not sure how.
Should you though?
That's
like those always sound like great ideas. You guys have heard me say this before. We did a 2-year or 100 episode celebration, and one of the bits of feedback we got was, thanks for wasting an hour of my life for all that congratulatory backslapping. And, those retrospectives sometimes lean that way if you're not careful. And the new audience, I don't know, Dave. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, but they're hard. They're hard to do.
It's a lot of work. Yeah. I started one once and I was like, ooh, I need to keep up on this. And then you just forget about it. So that's an idea. Yeah. But I did figure out, because my last 2 episodes were kind of, and I need to say it in this voice, my story, right? I'm going to tell you my story. And the first one was on the technical side. And the last one was all about relationships, how I met this guy who led to this, who led to that, who led to this. So it's really, I always say one of the biggest benefits of podcasting is the relationships. And I was really uncomfortable doing that. And I was like, okay, let's sit on the couch here, Dave, and figure out why is this so hard? Because to me, it's boring. Like, I lived it. I was there, and I was like, I think that's why, is I wasn't, most of the time, I'm pretty sure what I'm saying is going to resonate with the audience. And this was one where I'm like, And luckily, Stephanie had sent me a note, Ray from Around the Layout, had said, man, that was really inspiring and things like that. I am very happy to get back to not talking about Dave, but I think that's what really kind of, because on one hand, I was like, I don't really like to talk about myself. And then I'm like, wait a minute. Yes, you do. you're constantly telling stories in your episodes. So what is this? And I was like, yeah, but that's to make a point. And that's, part of an educational tool, just like, here's what I did. So I've now got over that kind of thought. Stephanie says, what do you do at these conferences? You show up and then what? You pretend you're not shy if you are, and you walk up to someone and you go, so what brings you to the show? And they're like, oh, I'm looking to network with other people. I do this. There's a place for vendors. So I'm going to be hitting all those booths that I normally don't get to spend a lot of time at. I get to go to the actual training sessions, but I'm really there to hang out in the hallway. That's the part I need to look and see if I can have a Podpage/School of Podcasting meetup, because I always used to say, oh, it's easy to find me at these things. Just come to the Libsyn booth. And, I guess I could go hang out at the Libsyn booth, but, no. So I did offer. I said it because Rob's not going to be there this event because his kid is going to Purdue. So Rob is moving his kid that weekend. And I go, if you guys want, again, I'll be an advisor for a week. And I know everything at Libsyn. And they thought about it. They're like, that's going to be weird because there's this announcement coming out. And then why is Dave at the booth? And did he leave?
That makes it weird. That makes it weird. In theory, it sounds good, but that makes it weird.
Yeah. So I do a lot of networking. I'm much better at that than I was 10 years ago. Because I remember, if we go back 15 years ago, I put the I in introvert. So I'm much better at that. I did laugh at the last Podfest. I walked in and it's me and Corey from Libsyn, and they're doing the whole kind of thing, meetup. And I looked around, everybody there was like 20 years younger than I was. And I didn't know anybody. And I looked at her and I go, oh crap. And she goes, what? I go, I don't know anybody here. And I go, I guess I'm going to have to get out of my comfort zone. Yeah. And I did. Yeah. And I went out in the hallway and just, what brings you to the show? And then you can see in the sessions, some of them are, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of sessions about AI and how it'll wipe your butt and do your dishes and, all that stuff. So I'll go. And the thing you want to do is look at the schedule and ahead of time, pick where you're going. Because there are some valuable lessons there. And then bring breath mints, chapstick, and comfortable shoes. And my thing that I've learned is I used to pretend I was 23 and stay up till 2 or 3 in the morning. And by the end, because that's like a week long. So when you deprive yourself of sleep, by the time you get to Friday, your body is either sick or you're just toast. I mean, Jim knows I'd come back on a Saturday and be like, that's the podcast coach, Friday. I'd have no voice. So I take the foot off the gas pedal a little bit now, because I remember in 2020 or 2021, whenever COVID was around, and I remember I was like, I should go to bed now, and I'm literally getting ready to hit the button on the elevator, and somebody goes, Dave! And I turn around and I went and hung out with them, and we were around a big group of people, and the next day I woke up and had COVID. I was like, I should have hit the button on the elevator. I'm like, that's, it is what it is. So
it is a great place to meet people, right? That you've seen. I got to hang out with Rob Greenlee one year, which was super awesome guy. Yeah. Like he's hung out with Todd Cochran, a couple times.
Jim, what's going on?
You get those opportunities to meet and see some people and have some conversations. Some of them are a little more willing to do the social things than not. I think lunch was a great time. I hung out with Steve Stewart one time at lunch and just had a great conversation. Yep. So there are some of those, opportunities to meet people. It is different when you're in person, right? Meeting Ray Ortega was awesome. Year it was 2018 or 2019, I think, one of those 2 years. So it's a great opportunity to run into people that you wouldn't normally run into. I always find that I find a few people, Dave, that I gravitate towards, and then you make better friends. You're like, oh hey, and then you meet up again and do some stuff together, sit with them in a session or whatever, and it just the relationships deepen. And that's the first time I met you in person was at a conference.
Yeah, my favorite thing to do is when I look up and there's 6 people standing in a circle and I know one of them. because I'll walk up and I'm like, Lou Mongello, what's up, buddy?
Yeah,
Say, Dave,
yeah.
great to see you. And then Lou will go, oh, that's Stephanie. That's she does this, and now I need these people. So the next time I walk into a room and I go, oh crap, I don't know anybody. I'm like, wait, I met Stephanie yesterday. Hey, Stephanie, what's going on? It was great meeting you yesterday. Like, did you learn anything fun yesterday? And then you just slowly grow your network, and then you make notes. And the other thing I do when I get home is I have business cards, and then I have a smaller business card pile. And the smaller pile are the people that I want to follow up with. And I follow up the minute I get home, because so much stuff happens at these conferences that you go, oh, I need, and then you get home and 2 weeks later, you're like, oh, I don't remember what this person is. So it's kind of tricky, but holy cow, another 90 minutes is underneath of us here. But, real quick, Chris says, have you ever thought of having your own booth? Yes, I have. And that's probably going to happen in the future sometime. Myself, I will have to see, but Brendan and I said, what if we split a booth? Because they're not cheap. They're thousands of dollars. And if we had a School of Podcasting / Podpage booth. So we're, or just a Podpage booth. It's a lot of money for those things. And then you pack in shipping, the signage, and
Get a sponsor.
Yeah.
Get a sponsor for it.
A sponsor for my sponsor.
Sponsored by. Yeah. Well, right on.
There you go.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, and Jeff says, I love the networking parties that have basically ear-bleeding madness. Yes, so much fun.
So terrible. I hate those.
Yeah, but it's
So
for the record, I've talked to Dan and Jared about that, especially like iHeart. iHeart has decided we're going to have the party of the thing. And so, because Dan and Jared go like, people kind of want to talk. And then you walk in and it's like, okay, well, we told them. So, Jim, what's coming up on Home Gadget Geeks?
Yeah, I had to take the week off. I had Jay Franzi lined up to be on the show. And Wednesday night, I was like, best laid plans, my friend. No show. It's nice. I mean, I could have done it because I had the power. But I'm thinking about so many other things. So if you need to take a week off, it's okay. Take it off. And I did as well. What's coming up on your show?
Yeah, so this week it was supposed to be the question of the month last week, but we had the big reveal. And so this week we're doing the question of the month. Why do you recommend things? What makes something recommendable? Because we want your show to be recommendable. And, if you need help with that, schoolofpodcasting.com. Use the coupon code COACH. Thanks to the chat room. You guys were amazing today. You're always amazing, but it was just like, okay, we didn't even go to one question from Reddit today, which is kind of what I like, because then I know I like it. But we're here every week. AskThePodcastCoach.com/live, and we'll see you next week. Take care, everybody.